Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to be doing a forensic audit of a pretty provocative document called the Scientific Indictment. We're going to zero in on its claims against the Rockefeller Family Foundations and the role the source says they played in shaping our modern world.
All right, let's just dive right in. The whole argument kicks off with this really explosive idea you see here. Basically, it's saying that these huge philanthropic initiatives we all know about, well, they weren't about charity. The claim is that they were actually engineered with a completely hidden purpose, to change the very definition of healthcare. So to really get our heads around this, we're going to follow the structure the source itself uses. It's broken down into a 5-part indictment. We'll start with this idea of a philanthropic Trojan horse, then get into how medicine and our resources were supposedly weaponized, how society was deconstructed, and then finally, the verdict on what it all adds up to.
Okay, first things first, let's lock down the core accusation. We're not just talking about a few questionable donations here. The document alleges that the whole model of modern philanthropy was used as a kind of Trojan horse for a much, much bigger agenda.
The document frames these acts not as charity, but as a really calculated multi-generational plan. The alleged endgame? To engineer what it calls a planetary sickness control grid by taking over society's most foundational pillars. We're talking medicine, food, and even culture itself.
So the first major charge in this indictment goes right for the jugular: the modern medical system. The source claims it wasn't just flawed, it was weaponized right from the very beginning.
So what is this medical industrial complex it talks about? Well, according to the source, the goal was never to actually cure anyone. Instead, the whole system was supposedly designed to manage sickness. Why? Because a chronically ill patient is a customer for life, a perpetual source of profit for patented chemical products.
Now this is where it gets really interesting. The source lays out this chain of events, which it basically calls a corporate-funded coup against natural and holistic medicine. It claims the 1910 Flexner Report wasn't some objective audit. No, it was a tool used to systematically shut down any competition and create a total monopoly for a brand new, very profitable, patent-based model of medicine.
All right, let's move on to the next count. This one argues that the attack didn't stop at the doctor's office. It claims the assault extended to the very things we need to survive, our food and our water. And this slide, wow, it perfectly captures the core of the indictment's method. It takes these public initiatives, things we've always been told are good, and completely reframes them. So on one side, you've got the official story we all know, and on the other, the indictment's claim that the Green Revolution was actually about controlling the food supply, and water fluoridation was a chemical attack on a key gland in the brain.
So, according to the document, this is a two-pronged chemical attack delivered right through our food. First, you have what it calls a mineral blockade, where chemicals in the soil supposedly stop plants from absorbing essential nutrients in the first place. Then there's gut destruction. Those same chemicals allegedly act like an antibiotic inside our bodies, wiping out our gut microbiome, which some call our second brain.
Okay, the next charge in the indictment shifts gears. It moves from the biological to the psychological. The claim here is that there was a deliberate and very well-funded effort to dissolve the traditional bonds of family and culture. The goal? To make people more isolated and more dependent on the state. And here, the document lays out what it calls the money trail. It alleges that these cultural movements and institutions, the Frankfurt School, the Tavistock Institute, the Kinsey Reports, even parts of the feminist movement, that they didn't just pop up out of nowhere. The claim is that they were all centrally funded and coordinated by the very same foundations. The indictment describes this whole strategy as a coordinated pincer movement. Think of it this way. The Frankfurt School was supposedly the software division. Their job was to create the ideologies, the viruses, to break down society. And at the same time, the Tavistock Institute was the hardware division. Their job was to figure out the scientific methods to install that software into the public.
And that brings us to the fifth and final part. The verdict. This is where the source connects all the dots. It argues these aren't separate, isolated events, but different fronts in a single, unified war for total control.
So we come full circle, right back to where we started. The argument's climax is that the ultimate goal was to engineer a population that is biologically weak and psychologically divided. Why? Because that makes it much, much easier to manage, and more importantly, to profit from, through a system of perpetual disease management.
So when you put it all together, the picture the document paints is pretty stark. It's arguing these were not random acts of charity at all. As you can see here, the claim is they were all interlocking components of a grand strategy, control medicine, control food, control water, and control culture, systematically targeting every single pillar of a healthy, independent society.
The indictment concludes by saying this entire control grid is held in place by a near-total monopoly on information. It points to this number, 6. Just 6 major media conglomerates, it claims, control over 90% of everything we read, watch, and hear. And when that happens, the official narrative is the only narrative.
And that is the really provocative question the Scientific Indictment leaves us with. It challenges us to look at the world, at our history, and ask, what if it wasn't all just a series of random accidents? What does it mean if you start to view it as a deliberate, calculated engineering project?